Hi, and welcome back to Ham Radio, the podcast for the Novo Collegian Alliance, also known as the NCA. I am, of course, your intro host, Kimbu York. I am the administrative coordinator for the NCA, and I produce this podcast. Today, we've got our host, Ben Brown, as usual. He's here to talk to one of our other board members, Juliana Paré. Dr. Juliana Paré, I should say. She has been teaching at Hopkins for a few years, although I hear tell in the story outside that she has some exciting adventures ahead of her in her career coming up over the next couple of years. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But she has been part of the NCA board long term. They're talking today specifically about a report that was done years ago. They're going to give you all the specifics on it, and they're going to talk about why it's important and what our plans are for the future concerning this report and other things like it. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben so he can talk to Juliana and they can explain to you why we're here today, why this matters, and what you can do to help the NCA.
Okay, welcome in, Novos. Welcome in. We're coming to you from up and down the Eastern Seaboard. Three people very involved with Novo Collegian Alliance. In April 2024, largely sort of through the encouragement of Juliana Paré, who's with us, the American Association of University Professors produced a report called A Financial Analysis of New College of Florida. Very thorough and detailed document of about 50 pages. For those of you who are into the nitty gritty of higher ed finances, you take a look at it. What NCA is cooking up now is trying to get a second report that would bring us current up through the present. So basically for 2 years following this first report that AAUP prepared, and we need to raise funding for this. So that's what we're reaching out to the community about, and not only in terms of what you might contribute yourself, but maybe you have connections who could help us find someone interested in sponsoring this important project. We've estimated the cost of getting this done, including dissemination and everything, at $3,500. And it's very interesting and important because New College is an unusual, very unusual financial beast, maybe almost as unusual as Enron was in the world of private corporations. So if that's not too much to say, let's get into it. And Juliana, if you could tell us a little bit about the first report and what the hopes are with the potential second report.
Thanks so much, Ben, Kimbu. First I wanted to say it's been really great working with both of you on NCA. The organization has really helped me to see how we can go from protesting to organizing and then reclaiming what is the true legacy of New College, which is a sense of agency and focus on academic inquiry. It's something I want for the current students. I want for the faculty who have been brought on to be able to grow into that tradition. And I worry that the financial improprieties, in even just the financial choices, if there aren't improprieties, is going to prevent that. I'm really happy to do that and very happy to be here with everybody talking about the report. I think one of the takeaway messages that I want people to have as they're thinking, should I donate to this, right? Is this the right thing? Should I seek out somebody else who might be able to contribute to this $3,500 ask? Following the money is never a bad idea. When you follow the money, you generate interest from people who want the best thing for New College, for people who want to stick it to the new leaders of New College, people who want to understand legitimately, okay, when you put in somebody who's never been trained in higher education management and finance, when you have a board of trustees that's ideologically motivated, very transparently, that's their words, what happens in an institution when those two things come together financially? For people who want what New College, the new College is going to deliver, ostensibly, following the money helps them see whether they're going to ever get that. So whether you are pro the takeover, probably not anybody listening to this, or you have all the kinds of problems with it that I think you should. If we follow the money, we can speak effectively to that entire spectrum. Because if you want what Richard Corcoran promised, you're going to be really mad when you see what he actually does with the money.
Right. If you look at New College today, it's a financial train wreck of the kind that you could spend years in the business world and not find anything approaching this. We know this and are comfortable saying it for a few reasons, including some of the information Mike Sanderson recently brought to light about misallocated E&G funds that were spent on athletics, which they're not supposed to be, and at the very least, not coded with a code that would necessitate and that would allow for spending them on athletics. That's just one example. I mean, it's almost unbelievable how bad it is, and I'm not quite sure what to say. It sort of slowly dawned on us as we were involved in New College post January 2023. But what we're looking at today is a report by the American Association of University Professors from April 2024. It's called Financial Analysis of New College of Florida. And now we're thinking about doing a chapter 2. So I'd just like to explain a little bit about what kind of analysis has been done so far and what more progress we might be able to make with the financial analysis of New College.
It was because of my experience with the American Association of University Professors financial report with Hopkins that I brought forward the idea of a report that led to the document that you just described, Ben. So first, I just want to say that a financial report is really a representation of the morals of the college. It's what they think is important to invest in. The average person might not care about the morals of the college, and that's why it's good that it's represented in a budget, because a lot of people care about the budget and where the money's going, whether it's going to students and faculty and the actual academics. And if it's going to athletics, is it going to athletics in a way that doesn't impede the students' ability to access the academic experience of New College? Because we're not anti-sports in principle. It's a question of whether or not the academic model is being well supported by the current budget.
Yeah, a little brief comment I'll make before we get into the meat and potatoes is that all of the SUS institutions, the 13 state university system institutions, live under this regime where they're only allowed to spend certain fund sources on athletics. And they all kind of, have to assiduously follow those rules or they get called out for it and they call one another out for it. But there is a chance here that Richard Corcoran has sort of carved out some kind of de facto exemption for himself where he can do what the others really don't feel comfortable doing because they face accountability that he somehow doesn't. So that's sort of what, we're getting into. Hey, there's a certain amount of planning that's supposed to go into athletics, hasn't been done at New College. But I just want to say, as someone familiar with the New College Foundation and with the college side of the budget as well, it's a pretty bad picture. Some of the unanswered questions regarding the foundation are pretty severe in terms of how it could possibly have used, how Richard Corcoran could have used the amount of foundation funds that he's used without broaching either fund restrictions or the overall limit on the foundation's annual spend rate of the endowment. This document from 2024, which I really, people may wish to read, it's detailed, and maybe you could talk a little bit about where we might head with this.
Sure. So the document that we have from 2024 has the hallmark features of an AAUP, the American Association of University Professors Financial Analysis Report. And the hallmark features include that it uses the publicly available data from both the New College 990, the New College Foundation 990, the information that they have to report to something called IPEDS, which is reporting to the federal government, and tracking the information in this case for the 24 report, it was over the past 5 years. And then the really critical piece is that it contextualizes the new college funding to other peer institutions and the state university system in general, and shows the implications of the differences that are found between the target organization, New College, and either its own past or the differences from the other institutions. So, for example, in this report, there are 2 types of positions at $200,000 salary that New College created in an administrative space that none of its peer institutions have. So we only have data, because it was done in 24, we only have data for a small amount of the time that Corcoran was in charge. The new report will give us the additional 2 years that he has been leading the college. And that will really allow us to see the differences between the then and the now. It goes beyond the numbers, and it really, because of the expertise of the AAUP model for how to pull out whether or not financial decisions are standard or not, it can help us understand what's genuinely necessary or what are ideological or political choices instead. So, for example, this creation of 2 positions that don't exist anywhere else and funding them at a level of $200,000 a year, that says something really important. So digging in, what did those positions lead to? Are they still being filled? Trying to find out through public record, it gives us a good opportunity to look into what did those positions accomplish for New College? Are they consistent with the academic mission or not? Another thing that was in the current report that I thought was really interesting, in the business plan, I guess we can call it a plan because that's its name.
Right.
Not sure if it counts, right? But in the business plan that was put forward by New College, it asked the legislature to allow New College to basically operate much more like a private institution while continuing to receive unlimited public funds. I hadn't noticed that when I looked over it, and I haven't heard other folks talk about it. But this report looks at the numbers in a way that reflects deep expertise about higher education, what its institutions typically do and don't do. So it's really giving us this credible, citable evidence that we can use in advocacy. We can share it with legislators, with accreditors, with donors, with media, with alums who may have, some of us do, idiosyncratic, quirky little bits of knowledge and expertise. Giving this report to our alums and outsourcing the opportunity to find important nuggets within it, I think is another big potential win in bringing the report out.
So in the very big picture, which is all I personally really know, I mean, I'm not into the details like Dr. Fox Garrity was when she created this first report. It's just an extremely expensive college on a per student basis, towering above every other public university in the state, towering above most private colleges, and somehow just kind of chugging along on the bay in Sarasota, Florida. You know, cost per degree, sometimes approaching $500,000. So you could instead of giving someone, the opportunity to attend college for 4 years, you could just give them a house free and clear. And maybe that would improve their life more, and it's all, really, taxpayer funds or in some small, and in the big picture, small foundation contribution.
Ben, can I break in here for a second on that $500,000, right? I want folks also to think about the fact that it's not like one student gets $500,000, right? And then they get a degree. And I mean, people know that it's not going to the student. But what I mean is that it takes $500,000 for that 4 years. But one of the secondary consequences of bringing in a lot of students through NIA, which is the sports organization that allows New College to have to provide for its students the opportunity to compete competitively, not just intramural. And NIA students, this is just like sort of a typical cultural thing for athletes in the NIA program. It's normal for them to come into a school for a year. Whether they get enough playing time or not will determine whether they decide to move on. In fact, I remember Corcoran saying in one of the committee meetings with trustees that in the efforts to make sure that students don't leave, one of the reasons that he would see as like okay if they left was that they didn't get enough playing time. So when you think about this $500,000, don't think of it as generating a graduate. Think of it as every 4 years for any butt that's in a seat, it's $500,000, right? Roughly. So you might not even get a graduate out of that. You might get 3 people that in total sat in seats for 4 years but didn't actually produce a graduate.
It's just such a bizarre thing as a college, New College right now. So I can only wonder what, a professional analyst thinks as they produce a document like this, and they're forced to write in this very, objective language, right? I mean, it's a very objective in tone. So part of what's going on here is we're dealing with a local and state conversation in Florida. Legislative sessions going on now, very interesting discussions about potentially transferring some of USF's revenue to New College and other bizarre things like that have sort of become supposedly necessary. But there's also a national conversation taking place about higher education that Juliana is really leading NCA and engaging with that national conversation. And I think the report has uses in both of those spheres. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit about what the value would be of this 2-year update and, how it would help us participate in these 2 different levels of conversation.
Sure. So the case of New College is particularly useful, I think, because it is so stark, right? There are villains and there are good guys. Different listeners might disagree who the villains are and who the good guys are, but whatever you think, it's very, very clear. Other universities, there is so much more gray area. So in the case of New College, having this kind of, we said like follow the money approach that very clearly lays out how the budget does or doesn't align with the rhetoric that is being used about what they want New College and higher education to look like. Having that in this very clear black and white kind of example is going to be important for other institutions that have to think about a much more gray area and that they can lose the forest for the trees, really, because they can't see what's gray and what's black and white. Having an example that they can go back to that is clearly described allows this other larger conversation and this set of participants to understand with clarity how budget decisions that they ought to be tracking ought to then connect to policy-related decisions. As much as it's been hard for us to get our heads around what is happening at our beloved alma mater, at other institutions, it's even harder because there aren't as many direct straight through lines unless you keep in your head a clear model for what it is to look for and watch for. So making sure that you watch for things like, student travel and research funds used to be funded at such and such a level. That's a really clear indicator what's happening on the ground right now. faculty used to have this kind of money available to help support independent engagement with students. What's happening with that on the ground right now? Faculty used to have this amount of authority in what kinds of courses they would teach and what they would teach inside those courses. What's happening on the ground with that right now in our institution? I was in a call with a faculty member from an Illinois institution last week. She described a conversation with a neuroendocrinology professor. They're changing what they teach preemptively to help ensure that they don't get targeted by students who will say that they are doing social justice and trans rights if they simply speak about the neuroendocrinology associated with sex characteristics. In North Carolina, administrators and students can now take video of faculty, and they are using that video later in decision-making processes related to that faculty being allowed to stay, being allowed to teach particular courses in the way that they want or at all. Those examples at other institutions and in other states, they can get lost in the shuffle. New College is such a focused, concentrated space. It helps to clarify, oh, these are the kinds of things I ought to be looking for.
I must say, to me, New College is a really bizarre case, and I must admit I misunderstood the takeover in January 2023. I understood the ideological arguments that were being made and the arguments about pedagogy, even if I didn't necessarily agree with them. I thought there was a sort of, they might be disagreeable, but there was a certain coherence to them. And New Colleges turned out to be far more bizarre than I could possibly imagine, with, as we sometimes mention, cost per student approaching $500,000, an incredibly high ratio of administrators to students, and other just extreme outlier statistics, including like the average discount of tuition. New College students in general are not really paying tuition today. I mean, tuition is a completely nominal concept at New College. And it's a bizarre and a strange beast, and it's far more bizarre than I anticipated. How do you use an example like that? Like in national higher ed land, people are dealing with problems that do not seem as severe. How do they see us?
So I'm going to answer the how you use New College and our very unfortunate situation effectively. We have a sense in America very deep in the national story that we are not only in a situation where, the arc of history bends towards justice, but that we are a democratic institution, that we are driving the arc of history in that way. When you have a really deep belief in something like that, it's very hard to incorporate evidence that goes against that belief. So even if you acknowledge it, you don't necessarily incorporate it in a way that changes what you predict. Like if I told you that, guess what? In Russia, 14 oligarchs all jumped out of their hotel windows again last week, you'd be like, oh yeah, that fits. That does seem an awful lot like something that would happen in Russia.
And just to be clear, that's a hypothetical case that hasn't actually happened recently, but it's something we could imagine.
Correct.
It's something we could imagine, and it's not too far distant from certain things that have happened in recent Russian history.
That's right. There have been oligarchs who have left their hotel via the window. And because that kind of jives with our understanding and thinking about some of the political forces and mechanisms, we don't find that jarring, and it just kind of fits in. In the U.S., if you think about what the norms and processes were in, say, 2000, compared to what they are now, they're virtually unrecognizable. And yet, the differences mean that these two systems are virtually unrecognizable. Yet we have a very hard time adjusting our thinking from a space of things go back and forth on a pendulum. There's a preponderance of people who are acting in good faith. And yes, there is, different kinds of lobbying influences, et cetera. But this is part of the normal ebb and flow of American politics. I would argue that the value of a case like New College is that when you really spell out what happened at New College and say, things are really different at New College now, and then you can show how what happened at New College is also happening at these other institutions, it starts to open up the possibility that people will make the leap from, I can predict what's going to happen at New College, right? It's going to get worse. They're overspending. They're possibly spending across different categories, which they shouldn't be doing. They are using a clear ideological agenda and wrapping it up in Orwellian language. We can all predict what's going to happen at New College. When you start to show people that what's happening at New College, 2 years ago is now beginning to happen at their institution, it opens up the door that they realize, oh, I can make this better prediction. It's kind of like, right, when we thought in terms of the Ptolemaic universe and thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, predictions were made, but there were some things that really didn't jive and didn't work. And once you had the paradigm shift, this kind of Kuhnian paradigm shift, you were able to see, oh, Copernicus is where it's at, right? Like we need a Copernican view that the sun is the center of our solar system. All of a sudden, you can predict correctly. Telling the New College story the right way, meaning lining it up in a way that shows how what happened at New College is also happening at other places, it helps people see that if they can predict accurately at New College and they apply that same line of thinking to their institution, they're going to be able to predict what's happening at their institution. And then you have to think, what is it that says about our country as a whole if these institutions of higher education are being pushed into and or are going willingly, in parts of them, are going willingly into a space that devalues faculty expertise and student inquiry. So I think that's, yeah.
I mean, just as a gloss for those who may be curious, she was referring to Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which, interestingly enough, is a book that's often taught in political science curricula, not just, in natural. I don't even know to what extent it's taught to natural sciences students, but I was given it as a political science student, and it's about the idea that the analysis of things is not kind of a linear development, but instead shifts from one paradigm to another. Very interesting thing to look at. To me, New College, and I think a lot of viewers know, I've had a pretty up close seat. It really, I will admit and say, to me, it really is an exceptional case. And the way I would frame it is Americans know that there's a lot of rentier capitalism in America. There has been for a long time. There's a lot of pork barrel politics. Often the beneficiaries of pork barrel politics are, pretty concentrated private interests, like a single, wealthy person who owns a business or a small group of the same. This is not unknown to people, but the brazenness of this kind of just prodigious public spending is not something known in the land of higher education. I mean, this level of unaccountable public spending with no appetite to impose any accountability about outcomes or, even basic, metrics like cost per student. Okay, cost per student. How can we get that somehow under control? Yeah, it's a liberal arts college. It's going to have a higher cost per student than a big state university, sure, but how can we get it, somewhere in line with like industry standards? That conversation hasn't really been happening, and that it is, there has been a barrier that's been blown past, in my personal opinion, personal experience with it. There, and also just the casual disregard for the rules, where every other institution within the Florida State higher education system feels accountable to one another and to the Board of Governors to follow the rules about things like, how athletic spending is categorized, what sorts of funds can be used for it, et cetera. And just kind of we'll just blow past the rules and we'll make up some excuse later, and almost as if we're trying to mock you or make fun of you. So just some personal reflections.
So one of the other things that I like about this kind of financial analysis report, as much as can be obscured, right now some things still can't be, right? Data still does need to be reported that has some bearing on reality. And because the financial analysis report uses publicly available information that has been directly reported by the college itself, that means it's a baseline that it's very, very hard for the administration to dispute. They submitted that data themselves. So if we use like Mike Sand's information in being able to say, you submitted this and it's looking a little squirrely across these different categories, can you let us know, like, why did you make the decision to report it in these different ways? And then you have a very legitimate accountability question. It makes the administration spend time justifying that set of actions, that way of reporting. It both produces more information for us. It produces a model, as I've said, for other alum groups and others. Also, it does to them what the Trump administration is doing with all of the lawsuits and all of the executive orders, making people who have a job to do spend time instead in higher education, focusing on make work garbage tasks. Like, I think I kind of know why they're doing the sorts of financial things that they're doing, right? I have my own theories around it, but I'd like to hear from them what story they come up with, and I'd like to make them make the case so that they have to spend the time doing that.
I mean, it's amazing at a place where cost per student has been around $100,000 per year. And I mean, you have this prodigious public spending, and it's amazing how miserable many of the faculty members are. You'd think that there would be some kind of, I'm looking for the right word, but, that would kind of ease certain pains, that level of financial largesse, and it's not at all.
So I got introduced to these kinds of reports during the pandemic. Johns Hopkins University, where I currently work, was one of the very first universities in the very, very early months of the pandemic to say, we don't have enough money. The thing we're going to cut is retirement supports. We are no longer going to make contributions to our faculty or staff's or administration's retirement accounts. So we commissioned an AAUP financial report and said, it looks like you didn't look in every drawer when you said you didn't have any money. So we were able to get that reversed at Hopkins, and they retroactively put the money back in that they wouldn't have otherwise. I guess I'm sort of curious if this report comes out and say all the faculty got a copy of it. What kind of town hall would they ask their administration for? Maybe they'll be too afraid to ask for it. That's the beauty of being alums. We can ask for that town hall and we won't get fired. We won't get expelled. They can't take our degree away from us.
So we'll commit to that right now. We do have a list of many of the faculty members' email addresses, and if the report is produced, we will. NCA will email it to all of them. Just to wrap up, if I could, our ask to the community is this. First, if you're interested in this kind of thing, especially if you have a financial or business background or higher ed background, read the April 2024 AAUP report on new colleges' finances, and reach out to us. Let us know what you think. And we now have monthly meetings on the last Thursday of every month where we welcome in any alum to talk about NCA affairs, but you could also email us. And then the second ask is, of course, help us find one or more sponsors, it could be you, for this 2-year update that we'd like to do, that we're now trying to fundraise for. I think I hope we managed to lay out, the real work that it could do in the world, and why we've identified it as an NCA project. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll have more, if you subscribe, however you're accessing this on YouTube or elsewhere, if you subscribe to the channel, there will be more updates of all different kinds, news, and happenings regarding New College and NCA.
Thanks so much for having me on Ham Radio, Ben. Thanks, Kimbo, as well.
You're only going to get the kind of talk where Copernicus, the Ptolemaic system, and a financial report from 2024 are all mentioned in the same conversation right here on Ham Radio. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you choose to support us in this endeavor. If you can't at this point in time, please share this video, this podcast. We're on all the podcast, we're slowly getting there as I record this, on all the podcast distribution channels. And if nothing else, go buy one of the mugs that Ben has been drinking from this whole time. We have a lot of merchandise, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. So
available in
joining us.
3 different sizes.
And available in 3 different sizes, as Ben points out. So we appreciate you joining us today, and we thank you for being here.